चाय ग्लास में क्या बात है? चलिए जी. Good evening, everyone. So this is Kanika Gupta, your TA for this course, and I'll be taking this doubt session every Monday, 6 to 8 p.m. And we'll be starting with this. Today, there's a slight change in our session. What I'll be doing is, as most of the slides have written material on them, and these are all very important points to understand this either countercurrent mechanism or the working in the nephrons. So we'll just try to understand these things by the text, and apart from that I'll also help you any other problem you have, and I'll try to add on something from my side also. But as these all of these points are very important to understand this, so we'll be concentrating more on the written text. Okay, so yes, we'll proceed with the session. Okay, so first of all, if you guys remember in the last week discussion, and obviously in the last week videos, you must have learned most of the things about this nephrons and how this loop of Henle is there and the Bowman's capsule is there, how filtrate is being formed, and thus that filtrate is passing through this loop of Henle, and then finally through distal convoluted tubule and in the collecting ducts. And after this collecting duct, maximum reabsorption of whatever is supposed to happen has happened, and now the fluid is passed into this renal pelvis, and through that into the ureter and in the urinary bladder at the end, and after that it is excreted out. So this is what a general flow of filtrate happens. General filtration in kidney happens as nephron is the functional unit of kidney. So we'll be first starting now we'll be starting with the part each and every part of the loop of Henle to understand that which thing is absorbed where, reabsorbed where, and what is secreted in this filtrate. Okay. So first of all, this is the secretion of organic acids and bases by the proximal tubule. So we all know the structure of a nephron. That is there's a Bowman's capsule, and in continuation with this Bowman's capsule is the proximal convoluted tubule. Then passing this proximal convoluted tubule into the thick descending limb of loop of Henle. Then the thin ascending descending limb of loop of Henle. Then the thin ascending limb of loop of Henle, and then the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle, and then the distal convoluted tubule, then the collecting ducts. So this is how the structure goes on. First we'll understand that in the proximal tubule, which is just after the Bowman's capsule, what happens there and how the secretion of organic acids and bases is occurring there. So in the proximal convoluted tubule, this is an important site for secretion of organic acids. Now the secretion here means that whatever the blood, the peripheral capillaries which are flowing in continuation with this, in proximity of this loop of Henle, through this the material is being secreted into the filtrate. Okay, the secretion term is used here because this organic acids or whatever these molecules, these organic molecules, these are secreted from blood to this filtrate. Okay, so these organic acids and bases such as bile salts, oxalates, urates, catecholamines. Catecholamines is a term used for epinephrine and norepinephrine. So all of these things which are being secreted from blood to the filtrate, which is being filtered through the Bowman's capsule. So these things are secreted into a filtrate which pass on into the loop of Henle. So many of these substances are the end products of metabolism and must be rapidly removed from the body. Because sometimes what happens is we are taking some kind of a drug, some medicine. So there are many products from these medicines which must not be left out in the body. They must be removed from the body time and again. So for that, these things are actually flowing through the blood. So when the blood is flowing near this loop of Henle, these things are secreted from blood into the filtrate directly, so that to avoid the toxic effect of these things when they are flowing in the blood. Okay. So the secretion of these substances into the proximal tubule plus filtration into the proximal tubule. So these things can enter into the filtrate by two ways. Either they can be filtered through the Bowman's capsule, and whatever amount is left which is still flowing in the blood is secreted into this filtrate by the secretion process that is happening in the proximal convoluted tubule. Okay? So secretion of these substances in the proximal tubule plus filtration into the proximal tubule by glomerular capillaries. These are present in the Bowman's capsule, and the almost total lack of reabsorption by tubules, because these substances are harmful for the body, so they are almost uh, no, not reabsorbed. Okay, they are totally secreted into the filtrate. Who is there? Just a moment. Yes. So yes, as I was telling you, so these are actually secreted into the filtrate, and they are then rapidly excreted through this urine filtrate in through this kidney filtrate, and they are excreted in the urine. Okay? So in addition, the kidneys secrete many potentially harmful drugs or toxins that are directly through the tubular cells into the tubules and rapidly clear these substances from the blood. In case of certain drugs such as penicillin salicylates, these are just an examples. There are many more drugs that are actually rapidly excreted out into the filtrate, in the nephron filtrate. So these are just some examples. So penicillin salicylates are one of those which are actually rapidly secreted into the filtrate via the blood, and also some amount is filtered through the Bowman's capsule also. Okay. To maintain its okay, and the rapid clearance by kidney creates a problem in maintaining a therapeutically effective drug concentration. So these are the things which pharmacology people keep in mind when they are designing some kind of a molecule, some kind of a substance. So they have to keep this thing in mind, that the half life of that substance should be enough to pose an effect on the whatever whoever is taking the drug. And also when they are getting filtered out, then obviously that doesn't cause much problem. The effect of the drug can be seen. Okay, so this is something pharmacology people keep in mind. Okay, so till now we have so much read about it, like this ion is being reabsorbed, this ion is being maintained in the filtrate, or whatever is happening with the ions. So what happens with water? Water is also getting reabsorbed at some point in the loop of Henle. So how this is happening? Water obviously cannot cross the plasma membrane as such. There must be some system involved in crossing this water from through this plasma membrane of the cells, and to enter into the interstitial medullary interstitium. So what happens is, here are the presence of aquaporins which facilitate this transfer of water from this filtrate to medullary interstitium. So these aquaporins are what? These are the plumbing systems for cells, as said by Peter Agre, that for many years scientists assumed that water leaked through the cell membrane, and some water does. कुछ वाटर अमाउंट जो है इंटरकैलेटेड एरिया से पास भी होता है, ठीक है, लेकिन इतना amount of water cannot pass through the intercalated spaces. There must be some system involved which can help this water to pass from one end to another end, or we can say from the lumen of these tubules to the interstitium. So what is that? This is the aquaporins which are actually helping in this movement of water from tubules to the medullary interstitium. So this is the distribution of aquaporins, and if you can see that these aquaporins are present in the proximal convoluted tubule. If you can see, there are many different types of aquaporins are present there. You don't need to remember that which aquaporin is present where, but you should know that what kind of a population of aquaporin is present where. Okay, so this, if you can see, there are many types of aquaporins present in the proximal convoluted tubule, and in the what thin descending limb of loop of Henle. There are also present aquaporins, and maximum of aquaporin 1 is present in the thin descending limb of loop of Henle. Okay. But one thing that you should keep in mind here is this: these aquaporins that are present in the proximal convoluted tubule are actually constitutively present. That means they are always there. It's not like they'll be there conditionally. They are present there always. Okay, so the aquaporins that are present in the proximal convoluted tubule are always present there. So constitutive expression होता है इनका. While if you can see, as the loop is taking a turn and it is going and going and going, the descending limb is formed. So either it is a thin ascending limb or thick ascending limb of loop of Henle. There is no aquaporin, so means no reabsorption of water. Okay, so this is something you should keep in mind, that in the thick ascending limb, sorry, not thick only, thin also. So in the ascending limb, you can generalize the statement that in the ascending limb of loop of Henle, there is no reabsorption of water as such. That's why this ascending limb of loop of Henle is also called as the diluting tubule. Okay, it dilutes the filtrate, so it is also called as the diluting tubule. Okay. After that, this gets converted into the distal convoluted tubule. In distal convoluted tubule, if you can see, there is no aquaporins present. Now the aquaporins come into the action in collecting duct. Okay. In collecting duct, maximum water reabsorption occurs. So aquaporins are present in the collecting duct, and here these aquaporins are conditional. Not all aquaporins here are constitutive. That means they will appear only upon activation, otherwise they won't appear on the plasma membrane of the cells that are lining the tubules. Okay, so this is something you should keep in mind. So let's see what they've written. To date, a total of 13 aquaporins have been cloned. They are localized to both the basolateral and apical membrane. Basolateral and apical membrane. Apical membrane, apical side कौन सी होती है सेल की? The side which is facing the tubule. ठीक है? तो ये वाली जो side होगी, this will be what? This will be apical side, and the side which is opposite to the tubules, that is the outer lining, the outer membrane of the outer side of the membrane of the cell is basolateral. ठीक है? So you should keep in mind. So these are present in both basolateral and apical membrane of the proximal tubule, and its presence allows water to move rapidly out of the tubule along the osmotic gradient set up by active transport of solutes, and isotonicity is maintained. Okay, to maintain the isotonicity, these aquaporins come into action. Okay, someone wanted to enter the meeting. हाँ जी प्रिया दर्शनी, आपने हैंड रेज किया है. डू यू वांट टू आस्क मी एनीथिंग?
What is isotonicity you tell me, ma'am?
Isotonicity means that the concentration of आप ये कह रहे हैं कि solutes की, because in we are talking about nephrons, so we'll talk about the in the terms of osmolality. So the osmolality is same across the membrane. That is a situation called as isotonicity. If let's say if the concentration that we will see further, if the concentration is higher in the tubule, the osmolality is higher in the tubule and it is lower in the medullary interstitium, then the situation will be called as what? Hypertonicity.
Isotonicity.
ठीक है? Isotonicity means it is same on both the sides. Do you got it, Priyadarshini?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, and another one question, ma'am. The kidney creates some toxic and harmful drugs, no, ma'am. In which state or what the reason to cause that toxic drugs or
Can you please repeat your question, Priyadarshini? I didn't get you.
Ma'am, in some cases, kidney creates harmful drugs and toxins, no, ma'am. In which condition it initiate to create the toxic drugs and harmful drugs, ma'am?
First of all, Priyadarshini, kidney won't create the drugs and toxins. Drugs and toxin must be created by the things that we intake, like some kind of drugs we have taken or some kind of a toxin we have ingested by mistake or something. So these things are entering into the kidney when we have ingested them. Okay, so these drugs and toxins are not created in kidneys. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. Shall I move forward, or do you want to ask anything more?
No ma'am, you can move.
ओके ओके, ठीक है जी। यहाँ तक समझ आया बाकी सबको? Okay, so we were talking
Yes,
about
ma'am.
aquaporins. The descending limb of loop of Henle is permeable to water. As I told you, descending limb is permeable to water. If you can see in the thick and thin limb, the aquaporins are present in thick limb also and thin limb also. Okay? Due to the presence of aquaporin 1 majorly, as I told you, aquaporin 1 is majorly present in the thin part of descending limb of loop of Henle. ठीक है? In the both apical and basolateral membrane, apical और basolateral membrane में दोनों जगह present होते हैं and they are present constitutively. ठीक है? But ascending limb is impermeable to water. If you can see, they have generalized the statement that in the whole ascending limb, either it is thick limb or thin limb, it is totally impermeable to water because they don't have any kind of aquaporins present in their membranes. Okay, so this is something you should know. Next is now we'll study about this loop of Henle part by part. Okay, so सबसे पहले we'll be talking about this thin descending limb of loop of Henle. Okay, the solute and water transport in the loop of Henle, how it happens. So the loop of Henle consists of three functionally distinct segments: the thin descending segment, the thin ascending segment, and the thick ascending segment. The thin descending segment and thin ascending segments are their names imply that they have thin epithelial membranes with no brush borders. If you guys remember in the last week's lectures, sir had shown the pictures of the cells, the electron microscopic pictures of the cells of proximal convoluted tubule, which is actually forming the thick limb also of the loop of Henle, the thick descending limb. So if you guys remember, those cells were actually highly villated. Okay, they were many villus present on the apical membrane of those cells. So they were brush bordered cells. But in case of this thin limbs of loop of Henle, there is no brush border cell present. They are plain cells. Okay, few mitochondria and minimal level of metabolic activity is there in these cells. So the descending part of thin segment is highly permeable to water due to the presence of aquaporin 1. Okay, and moderately permeable to most solutes. जितने भी solutes हैं उनके लिए it is moderately permeable, पर water के लिए it is highly permeable. ठीक है? अब यहाँ पे आप लोग अगर if you guys can answer me, and if you guys are attending the lectures carefully, if this limb is highly permeable to water but moderately permeable to solute, so what would happen here? The filtrate will get concentrated here, so the osmolality of the filtrate will increase. Okay, let's say for example the filtrate is coming with an osmolality of 300, but when the filtrate is reaching this limb, the water is getting reabsorbed in the medullary matrix, in the medullary interstitium, but the solutes are moderately reabsorbed. Apart from that, maximum of the solute is present in the filtrate only. So this filtrate is actually getting concentrated as the water is getting removed and the osmolality of the filtrate is increasing. So this is the concentrating limb of this loop of Henle. Okay, and moderately permeable to most solutes including urea and sodium. Okay, and the function of this nephron segment is mainly to allow simple diffusion of substance through its wall. Okay, so simple diffusion can occur, but maximum of the water reabsorption occurs here. Apart from that, collecting duct also, we'll see it in further when we'll proceed in the class. But for now, you should remember that this segment is highly permeable to water, so a large amount of water is reabsorbed here. Okay? If you can see the amount, that is about 20% of the filtered water is reabsorbed in the loop of Henle, and almost all of this occurs in this thin descending limb. क्योंकि thick to ascending limb तो क्या है हमारा impermeable to water. Okay. Now comes the turn of ascending limb. Ascending limb में क्या होता है? Including both the thin and thick portion, it is virtually impermeable to water, and a characteristic that is important for concentrating the urine. ठीक है? तो it is actually क्या होगा? Virtually impermeable to water है. The thick segment of loop of Henle, which begins about halfway up the ascending limb, has thick epithelial cells. थिक epithelial cells है and aquaporins है नहीं, तो उसकी वजह से क्या होगा कि यहाँ पे वाटर का जो reabsorption है वो नहीं होगा, ठीक है. So has thick epithelial cells that have high metabolic activity and are capable of active reabsorption. Active reabsorption means the energy, the ATP will be used here to reabsorb what? Sodium, chloride and potassium. For this we all know we have some exchangers and uh, ATP systems, ATP pumps are involved, ठीक है. ATPases pumps are involved which actually help in reabsorption of these ions. About 25% of the filtered loads of sodium, chloride, potassium are reabsorbed in the loop of Henle, mostly in the thick ascending limb. अब यहाँ पे वाटर की अमाउंट इज एज सच, वाटर की अमाउंट को कुछ नहीं हो रहा है क्योंकि ये इम्परमिएबल टू वाटर है, बट आयंस आर बीइंग रीअब्सॉर्ब. तो यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है? डाइल्यूशन हो रहा है किसका? फिल्ट्रेट का, ठीक है. So here the dilution of filtrate is happening because osmolality of the fluid inside this thick ascending limb is decreasing, it is falling down. Okay, so the considerable amount of other ions such as calcium, bicarbonate and magnesium are also reabsorbed in this thick ascending limb of loop of Henle. And the thin segment of ascending limb has a much lower reabsorptive capacity than the thick ascending segment, and the thin descending segment limb does not reabsorb significant amount of any of these solutes, है ना. हम लोगों ने पढ़ा था इट इज मॉडरेटली रीअब्सॉर्बिंग, बट वाटर को ही अच्छे से रीअब्सॉर्ब करता है. व्हाट? थिन डिसेंडिंग लिम्ब, ठीक है. तो ये चीज आपको एक जनरलाइज्ड सिस्टम है दैट यू शुड कीप इन माइंड, तो आपको समझने में आसानी होगी, ठीक है. द थिक सेगमेंट ऑफ द ascending limb of loop of Henle is virtually impermeable to water, ये हम लोगों ने पढ़ लिया है. And the tubular fluid in the ascending limb becomes very dilute. डाइल्यूट क्यों हो रहा है? क्योंकि वाटर का अमाउंट एज सच है पर सोल्यूट्स जो है वो डिक्रीज हो जा रहे हैं, तो ऑस्मोलैरिटी क्या कर रही है? कम हो जा रही है. ऑस्मोलैरिटी कम हो जाएगी तो जो फिल्ट्रेट फ्लो कर रहा है वो अपने आप से क्या हो जाएगा? डाइल्यूट हो जाएगा, ठीक है. तो और जब ये थिक असेंडिंग लिम्ब से जाता है तो उसके बाद क्या आती है? हमारी डिस्टल कॉन्वोल्यूटेड ट्यूब्यूल. तो फ्लूइड एंटर्स फ्रॉम दिस थिक असेंडिंग लिम्ब टू distal convoluted tubule, ठीक है. A feature that is important in allowing the kidneys to dilute or concentrate the urine under different conditions. Different conditions क्या हो सकती हैं? या तो हमने बहुत ज्यादा पानी पी लिया या हम बहुत डिहाइड्रेटेड हो गए, ठीक है. तो अकॉर्डिंग टू दीज डिफरेंट कंडीशन डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द डिफरेंट फिजियोलॉजीज कि ये जो है यहाँ पे दिस सेगमेंट एक्चुअली हेल्प्स इन आइदर कॉन्सेंट्रेटिंग और डाइल्यूटिंग द fluid that is passing through this loop of Henle. ठीक है? So the thick ascending loop of Henle plays a key role in production and maintenance of renal medullary hypertonicity. ठीक है, हाइपरटॉन्सिटी अभी मैंने समझाई थी, तो उसको मेंटेन करने के लिए लूप ऑफ Henle plays a great role. This last function provides the kidney with the ability to form urine that can be more diluted or concentrated than plasma depending upon what is the situation, what is the demand of the body. Okay. Now let's see what is the mechanism in this thick ascending limb. So, if you guys remember, we had read about this NKCC transporter, co-transporter. If you guys remember, NKCC co-transporter हम लोगों ने पढ़ा था in the last week. So that is what they are saying here also. This is we are talking about the thick ascending limb. So what happens here on the basal side, this sodium potassium pump is working, which uses ATP, and due to this sodium actually draws what? This NKCC pump. ठीक है? Due to this decreasing concentration of sodium, this NKCC pumps come into the action, and this will again these are very important pumps. Why? Because these are actually the loop diuretics. These help these are also called as the loop diuretics. Why? Because when this pump is inhibited using this drug, that is furosemide, then it is helping in maintaining the BP of this the person who is taking this drug. ठीक है, तो जनरली जो हाई बीपी पेशेंट्स होते हैं उनको ये दिया जाता है to maintain the BP, to actually inhibit this NKCC co-transporter. ठीक है, तो अब देखते हैं क्या कहते हैं. An important component of solute reabsorption in the thin ascending limb is the sodium potassium ATPase pump in the epithelial cell basolateral membranes. ठीक है, बेसोलेटरल मेम्ब्रेन्स में जो एटीपीएस पंप है ये सोडियम पोटेशियम, दिस इज एक्चुअली द वन विच इज एक्चुअली डिराइविंग दिस एनकेसीसी को ट्रांसपोर्टर. ठीक है, दिस मेंटेन्स अ लो इंट्रासेल्युलर सोडियम कंसंट्रेशन, सोडियम की कंसंट्रेशन अंदर सेल में कम हो जाएगी, जिसकी वजह से क्या होगा, दिस लो इंट्रासेल्युलर सोडियम कंसंट्रेशन इन टर्न प्रोवाइड्स अ favorable gradient for movement of sodium because this pump is not using the energy. So there must be something which activates this pump to draw maximum of the sodium according to the requirement. So this is what the gradient in concentration is actually what draws the sodium through this pump inside the cell. Okay, so favorable gradient for movement of sodium from the tubular fluid into the cell. ठीक है, in the thick ascending loop movement of sodium across the luminal membrane is mediated primarily by NKCC pump, or we can say sodium chloride potassium co-transporter. ठीक है, सोडियम पोटेशियम क्लोराइड को ट्रांसपोर्टर, इसको हम कहते हैं एनकेसीसी. ठीक है, दिस को ट्रांसपोर्ट प्रोटीन कैरियर इन द ल्यूमिनल मेम्ब्रेन, ल्यूमिनल मतलब एपिकल साइड ऑफ द मेम्ब्रेन, uses the potential energy released by downhill diffusion of sodium into the cell to drive the reabsorption of potassium into the cell against the concentration gradient. ठीक है, तो concentration gradient is what actually helping this pump to this co-transporter to absorb these ions from the filtrate. Okay. Again, the NKCC co-transporter is a protein that aids in the active transport of sodium potassium chloride into and out of the cells. There are two varieties, NKCC1 and NKCC2. These are the two isoforms, and furosemide and other loop diuretics inhibit the activity of NKCC2, thereby impairing sodium reabsorption into the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle. और जिसकी वजह से क्या होगा, impaired sodium reabsorption prevents thick ascending limb from contributing to the maintenance of the blood pressure, जिसकी वजह से क्या होगा, डिक्रीज हो जाएगा ब्लड प्रेशर. ठीक है, ब्लड प्रेशर डिक्रीज हो जाएगा. सो दिस फ्यूरोसेमाइड इज एक्चुअली यूज्ड फॉर द हाई ब्लड प्रेशर पेशेंट्स टू डिक्रीज द ब्लड प्रेशर. ठीक है, दिस इज वन ऑफ द ड्रग विच इज यूज्ड. ओके, अर्ली डिस्टल ट्यूब्यूल. Okay, someone wants to enter the meeting. Everyone, I hope you can see the slides and you guys can understand what I'm trying to make you understand. Okay, I hope you guys are understanding it. Okay, so early distal tubule, what happens in early distal tubule? The thick segment of ascending limb of the loop of Henle empties into distal tubule, as I told you, distal convoluted tubule. अच्छा, एक चीज और हम लोगों ने distal tubule में पढ़ी थी, वो क्या होता है, मैक्यूला डेंसा. ठीक है, मैक्यूला डेंसा इज ऑल्सो देयर टू हेल्प इन मेंटेनेंस ऑफ ब्लड प्रेशर. ठीक है, वो सब हम पिछले लेक्चर्स में पढ़ चुके हैं. ठीक है, so the thick segment of ascending limb of loop of Henle empties into the distal tubule. The very first portion of distal tubule forms part of the juxtaglomerular complex that provides feedback control of GFR, and this part is called as what? Macula densa. ठीक है, this is macula densa. चलिए, so this is what macula densa, and blood flows in this same nephron. The early distal tubule is highly convoluted and has many of the same reabsorptive characteristics of the thick segment of ascending limb of loop of Henle. So distal convoluted tubule is almost similar to the in terms of properties, it is almost similar to the thick ascending limb of loop of Henle. That is, it avidly reabsorbs most of the ions including sodium, potassium and chloride, but is virtually impermeable to water and urea. ठीक है, यूरिया का भी बहुत बड़ा रोल होता है टू मेंटेन दिस osmolality in the medullary interstitium, that we'll see further in the lecture. So this is something you must remember. For this reason, it is referred as the what? Diluting segment. ठीक है ना, आयंस रीअब्सॉर्ब हो रहे हैं, वाटर इज एज सच, वाटर के अमाउंट में कोई चेंज नहीं आ रहा, तो इट इज गेटिंग डाइल्यूटेड। ठीक है, अर्ली डिस्टल ट्यूब्यूल में वही, यहाँ पे क्या होगा, एनसीसी काम करता है, यहाँ पे सोडियम क्लोराइड सिम्पोर्टर काम करता है, एंड दीज आर कॉल्ड एज दी थायजाइड डायरेटिक्स। ठीक है, थायजाइड टाइप ऑफ डायरेटिक, जो इस तरह के डायरेटिक्स होते हैं, दे वर्क, दे एक्चुअली एक्ट ऑन दिस एनसीसी, दैट इज सोडियम क्लोराइड सिम्पोर्टर। क्या करते हैं ये, लीडिंग टू द रिटेंशन ऑफ वाटर इन द यूरिन एज वाटर नॉर्मली फॉलोज पेनिट्रेटिंग सोल्यूट्स। ठीक है, frequent urination is due to the increased loss of water that has not been retained from the body as a result of what, concomitant relationship with sodium loss from the convoluted tubule। ठीक है, सोडियम का जितना लॉस होगा, तो उससे क्या होगा कि यहाँ पे जो वो है, ऑस्मोलैलिटी का डिफरेंस बहुत ज्यादा नहीं आएगा मेडुलरी इंटरस्टिशियम और ट्यूबुलर फ्लूइड में, जिसकी वजह से क्या होगा कि वाटर का जो रीअब्जॉर्प्शन है वो ज्यादा नहीं हो पाएगा, तो मैक्सिमम वाटर विल बी एक्सक्रीटेड आउट। दिस इज अ मैकेनिज्म, और वी वुड से these type of diuretics are again suggested by the doctors in case of a high BP patient। ठीक है, so this is just again a representation of thiazide diuretics। ठीक है, लेट डिस्टल एंड कॉन्वर्टिंग ट्यूब्यूल। अब अच्छा, लेट डिस्टल एंड कलेक्टिंग ट्यूब्यूल में क्या होता है भाई, सॉरी, यहाँ पे आप लोग को जो एक चीज याद रखने वाली है या समझने वाली है वो ये कि व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस लेट डिस्टल कॉन्वर्टेड ट्यूब्यूल एंड कलेक्टिंग डक्ट बोथ, तो इसमें क्या होगा, देयर आर टू टाइप्स ऑफ सेल प्रेजेंट इन द लाइनिंग ऑफ दिस ट्यूब्यूल, intercalated cell and principal cell। Intercalated cell here, if you can see from the picture, these are actually brush bordered cells। ठीक है, these are brush bordered cells। एक मिनट, हाँ, these are actually brush bordered cells, जबकि principal cells क्या होती हैं, these are not, these are plain cells। ठीक है, जिसे हम देखते आ रहे हैं लूप ऑफ हैंडले। ठीक है, तो प्रिंसिपल सेल्स का क्या होता है, these cells in the connecting segment and the cortical collecting ducts are the most, ठीक है, कलेक्टिंग ट्यूब्यूल के भी ये सिर्फ कॉर्टिकल रीजन में प्रेजेंट होंगी, उसके बाद कलेक्टिंग डक्ट जो मेडुलरी रीजन में चला जा रहा है वहां नहीं होता है इस तरह का कि आपके पास दो तरह की सेल्स हो, इट इज ओनली जस्ट इन द अर्ली कलेक्टिंग डक्ट यू कैन से, और इन द कॉर्टिकल पार्ट ऑफ द कलेक्टिंग डक्ट। ठीक है, Acha, the principal cells are of importance here because these are the cells which are the most important targets for aldosterone। Aldosterone क्या है? It is a steroid hormone secreted by what? Adrenal medulla। ठीक है, adrenal gland से जो है ये secrete होता है, and this aldosterone increases the sodium permeability of luminal membrane and helps to reabsorb the sodium। जितना सोडियम रीअब्सॉर्ब होगा, बीपी उतना ही क्या हो जाएगा, इंक्रीज हो जाएगा। ठीक है, तो ये अगेन इट इज यूज्ड टू मेंटेन द ब्लड प्रेशर। ठीक है, तो दिस इज व्हाई द प्रिंसिपल सेल्स आर ऑफ इंपॉर्टेंस। अच्छा, प्रिंसिपल सेल्स में क्या होता है, प्रिंसिपल सेल्स हैव दिस एपिथेलियम सोडियम चैनल। ठीक है, ड्यू टू दिस एपिथेलियम सोडियम चैनल क्या होगा कि ये जो सोडियम आयंस हैं, they will move through these channels and will cross this cell by the sodium potassium pump that is present on the basolateral side and will get add into the interstitium, causing an increase in the osmolality of the interstitium and then an increase in the blood pressure। ठीक है, so that is why these principal cells are of importance। Again, this is showing that only this epithelial sodium channel, the aldosterone increases the sodium potassium pump and facilitates the insertion of epithelium sodium channels। Epithelial sodium channels be, they are not present there always, they are actually inserted into this epithelium of the tubule cells so that they can take up as much as sodium they can, ठीक है, into the luminal membrane। And the epithelial sodium channel is a membrane bound ion channel that is permeable to sodium ions only, क्योंकि ये epithelial sodium channel ही है। It also increases expression of sodium potassium ATPase। अच्छा, this is the thing we are talking about aldosterone। aldosterone क्या करता है, एक तो ये ENACs जो है उनको पोस्ट करा देता है, उनको एक्टिवेट करा देता है और उस पे luminal side of the ट्यूब्यूल मेम्ब्रेन्स, ट्यूबुलर सेल मेम्ब्रेन्स। एंड ऑल्सो ये क्या करता है, सोडियम पोटेशियम पंप्स का नंबर भी इंक्रीज करा देता है, कहाँ पे, बेसोलेटरल साइड पे, so that these pumps can pump maximum amount of sodium outside the cell into the interstitium, and these epithelium sodium channels can take much more sodium from the filtrate. ठीक है. So by inducing its synthesis and membrane insertion, renal outer medullary potassium channel is an ATP dependent potassium channel that transport potassiums out of the cell. ठीक है, तो जब पोटेशियम जो अंदर आ रहे हैं, व्हेन दिस सोडियम पोटेशियम पंप इज वर्किंग, तो ये जो पोटेशियम पंप है, ये एक्चुअली पोटेशियम को पंप करेगा ल्यूमेन में, और सोडियम को पंप करेगा इनसाइड, सॉरी, this epithelial sodium channels will pump this sodium inside, and this sodium potassium pump will work and take this sodium into the medullary interstitium. ठीक है. So this is how this thing work. Late distal tubule, that's what we are talking about. ये मैंने आपको बताया कि aldosterone will work, it will activate the both this epithelial sodium channels and also the sodium potassium pump. ठीक. This is again showing that only that when this aldosterone will enter inside the cell, this aldosterone is a steroid hormone, so it doesn't need to be to activate a secondary signaling process. It can enter inside the cell very easily. So when it enters inside the cell, it will bind to its receptor, that is mineralocorticoid receptor in the cytoplasm, where when this aldosterone binds to the receptor, it dimerizes the receptor. This receptor will enter inside the nucleus. It will activate the transcription factors, synthesis of transcription factor inside the nucleus, and these transcription factors then eventually lead to the formation, to the localization of these epithelial sodium channels into on the apical membranes, and the sodium potassium pumps in the basolateral membrane. ठीक है. So this is what they are explaining here. अच्छा, एक चीज और यहाँ पे वर्क करती है, इंटरकैलेटेड सेल्स जो होती हैं उनका क्या काम होता है यहाँ पे. So intercalated cells avidly secrete hydrogen and reabsorb what, bicarbonate and potassium ions. ठीक है, बाइकार्बोनेट का reabsorption, if you see it clearly, you won't see it anywhere in the whole loop of Henle. It will happen here in this late distal convoluted tubule by the intercalated cells. So hydrogen ion secretion by intercalated cell is mediated by what? Hydrogen ATPase transport mechanism. Hydrogen is generated in this cell by the action of carbonic anhydrase on water and carbon dioxide to form the carbonic acid, which then dissociates into hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ion. The hydrogen ions are then secreted into the tubular lumen, and for each hydrogen ion secreted, a bicarbonate ion becomes available for reabsorption across the membrane. ठीक है. So this what happens? This bicarbonate will be sent into the medullary interstitium and eventually into the blood. ठीक. So intercalated cells का क्या काम होता है? They play a key role in acid base regulation of the body fluids. ठीक है. This is the same thing they have explained here with high levels of ADH. ADH क्या हो गया हमारा, antidiuretic hormone. These tubular segments are permeable to water, but in the absence of ADH, they are virtually impermeable to water. That means that in the presence of ADH, the aquaporins will be localized onto the membranes of the tubule cells. Otherwise, these aquaporins will stay in the cytoplasm in the vesicles. ठीक है. So this is conditional. When the ADH is there, it will activate this reabsorption of water. Otherwise, the aquaporins won't go to the surface in case of the late distal tubule and cortical collecting duct we are talking about. ठीक है. ठीक है जी. मेडुलरी कलेक्टिंग डक्ट में क्या होता है, ऑल्दो द मेडुलरी कलेक्टिंग डक्ट रीअब्सॉर्ब्स लेस देन 10% ऑफ द फिल्टर्ड वाटर एंड सोडियम, they are the final site for processing the urine. ठीक है. medullary collecting duct के बाद there is no processing of urine. It will be delivered as such through ureter to urinary bladder, and then it will be excreted out. ठीक है. So these are the final site for processing the urine and therefore play an extremely important role in determining the final urine output of water and solutes. ठीक है. So epithelial cells of collecting ducts are nearly cuboidal in shape with smooth surfaces and relatively few mitochondria. ठीक? And special characteristics of these tubular segments are the permeability of medullary collecting duct of water is controlled by antidiuretic hormone, ठीक है, ADH. And unlike the cortical collecting tubules, the medullary collecting duct is permeable to urea. Now urea will come into action. The urea will be reabsorbed in this medullary collecting duct to maintain the osmolality in the medullary portion of the kidneys. Yeah. Therefore, some of the tubular urea is reabsorbed into the medullary interstitium, helping to raise the osmolality in this region of the kidneys and contributing to the kidneys' overall ability to form a concentrated urine. ठीक है? This graph is actually explaining कि when the fluid is passing through different parts of the nephron, then what is being secreted, which concentration is going high, which concentration is dropping. So this you should understand this graph, and if you can see that tubular fluid plasma concentration of glucose, protein and amino acids वो इनिशियली हाई है जब वो लोग फिल्टर होके आए हैं, बट एज द फ्लूइड passes through the proximal tubule it hasn't reached till loop of Henle till now, but all of this glucose, protein, amino acids have been reabsorbed. There is no amount of glucose, protein or amino acid is left in the filtrate in normal conditions, but yes, if the person is diseased then the scenario will be different. ठीक? So this is again being shown for each and every ion and compound that is being secreted. ठीक है, हाँ. अब एंजियोटेंसिन 2 के बारे में भी हमें पता होना चाहिए. एंजियोटेंसिन 2 हम लोगों ने कहाँ पढ़ा था? इफ यू गाइस रिमेम्बर, जस्ट unmute your mic and do let me know so that I can proceed further. Anyone if can tell me, हमने एंजियोटेंसिन 2 कहाँ पढ़ा था भाई? कोई नहीं बताना चाहता. तो एंजियोटेंसिन 2 हम लोगों ने पढ़ा था रास सिस्टम में. याद आया आप लोगों को? हाँ जी, हम लोगों ने रास सिस्टम में पढ़ा था एंजियोटेंसिन 2. क्या होता है एंजियोटेंसिन 2? इट इंक्रीजेस द सोडियम एंड वाटर रीअब्जॉर्प्शन. इट इज द बॉडीज मोस्ट पावरफुल सोडियम रिटेनिंग हार्मोन. ठीक है, अब अगर ये सोडियम और वाटर का रीअब्जॉर्प्शन कराएगा तो दैट मीन्स इट विल लीड टू द इंक्रीज इन ब्लड प्रेशर. ठीक है, और यही हम लोगों ने देखा था कि जब रेनिन एंजियोटेंसिनोजन सिस्टम, जो कि इसको हम रास सिस्टम भी कहते हैं, वो कब एक्शन में आता है? जक्स्ट्राग्लोमेरुलर सेल्स रेनिन को कब रिलीज करते हैं? व्हेन दिस सेंस दैट देयर इज अ डिक्रीज इन ब्लड प्रेशर. ठीक है, तो दिस रेनिन विल एक्ट ऑन व्हाट? एंजियोटेंसिनोजन. Angiotensin will get converted into angiotensin 1. This angiotensin 1 will then reach into the lungs where the ACE will act upon this and it will be converted into angiotensin 2. ठीक है, दिस एंजियोटेंसिन 2 क्या करता है? फिर सोडियम और वाटर की रीअब्जॉर्प्शन कराता है. Its release is associated with the low blood pressure or low extracellular fluid volume, such as during hemorrhage or loss of salt and water from the body fluids by excessive sweating or severe diarrhea. तभी उस केस में डॉक्टर्स जो हैं ORS पीने की हम लोग को सलाह देते हैं, या फिर कभी हम मतलब नींबू चीनी का घोल, नमक चीनी का घोल, इस तरह का जो भी डॉक्टर सजेस्ट करते हैं. तो डायरिया केस में इसीलिए, ताकि सॉल्ट्स का अमाउंट जो है वो ब्लड में मेंटेन रहे, सो दैट एक्सेसिव लॉस ऑफ वाटर ना हो बॉडी से और बॉडी में डिहाइड्रेशन ना हो. ठीक है, so it has three main effects. Angiotensin 2 stimulates aldosterone secretion which in turn increases sodium reabsorption. अच्छा, ये aldosterone की secretion कहाँ से बढ़ाता है? एड्रीनल ग्लैंड से, एड्रीनल मेडुला से. ठीक है, so angiotensin 2 करता क्या है? It constricts the efferent arterioles which has two effects on the peritubular capillary dynamics that increases sodium and water reabsorption. First, efferent arteriole constriction reduces what? Peritubular capillary hydrostatic pressure which increases net tubular reabsorption. प्रेशर अगर अंदर कम होगा तो उसका मतलब क्या है कि अंदर वाटर कम है, वाटर कम है तो फिर क्या होगा? रीएब्जॉर्प्शन जो है वहां पे चालू हो जाएगा. ठीक है, सेकंड इफरेंट आर्टीरियोलर कॉन्स्ट्रिक्शन क्या करता है, रिड्यूसेस रीनल ब्लड फ्लो विच रेजेस द फिल्ट्रेशन फ्रैक्शन in the glomerulus and increase in the concentration of proteins and the colloids osmotic pressure in the peritubular capillaries. This increases the reabsorptive force. Force increase हो जाएगा reabsorption का at the peritubular capillaries and raises what? Tubular reabsorption of sodium and water. ठीक है, तो this is all body's mechanism to maintain the homeostasis. ठीक है, एंजियोटेंसिन 2 है ये करता कैसे है, इट बाइंड्स टू इट रिसेप्टर्स 81. ठीक है, it directly stimulates what? Sodium reabsorption in the proximal tubules, loop of Henle and the distal tubules and the collecting duct also by sodium hydrogen exchange antipode. ठीक है, it activates that. और उसका क्या होगा, वन ऑफ द डायरेक्ट इफेक्ट क्या होगा एंजियोटेंसिन 2 का, इज टू स्टिमुलेट सोडियम पोटेशियम एटीपीएस पंप. वो जैसे ही स्टिमुलेट होगा सोडियम की कॉन्सेंट्रेशन सेल में गिरने लगेगी, जैसे वो गिरने लगेगी तो उसकी वजह से क्या होगा, सोडियम हाइड्रोजन एक्सचेंज पंप भी इन्होंने शुरू किया हुआ है, तो उसकी वजह से क्या होगा कि सोडियम जो है वो अंदर आना शुरू हो जाएगा. एंड द थर्ड इफेक्ट क्या होगा, स्टिमुलेट द सोडियम बाइकार्बोनेट को ट्रांसपोर्ट आल्सो इन द बेसोलेटरल मेम्ब्रेन. तो जो बाइकार्बोनेट है, सोडियम है, वो बेसोलेटरल मेम्ब्रेन के थ्रू दो जगह से जा रहा है सोडियम इन द medullary interstitium and eventually into the blood by sodium potassium pump also and the sodium bicarbonate co-transport also. This is all the effect, under the effect of angiotensin 2. ठीक है, ठीक है जी. अब इसके बाद हम लोग आ गए हैं एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट मैकेनिज्म पे, जो कि किसी भी टेरेस्ट्रियल ऑर्गेनिज्म में टू सर्वाइव ऑन द लैंड इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, दैट इज काउंटर करंट मैकेनिज्म. ठीक है, तो इसका इस्तेमाल क्या है, लेट्स सी. वाटर इज कंटिन्यूअसली लॉस्ट फ्रॉम द बॉडी थ्रू वेरियस रूट्स. स्वेटिंग में भी जा रहा है, यूरिन के थ्रू भी जा रहा है, ठीक है, और इवेपोरेट हो रहा है हमारी बॉडी के पोर्स से भी. ठीक है, जो हम बहुत टाइनी टाइनी पोर्स होते हैं, जब स्वेटिंग को बेसिकली हम कहते हैं पर्सपायरेशन, तो उसमें भी जो है जाता है. समटाइम्स जो एक थिन लेयर ऑफ वाटर कई बार बन जाती है स्किन के ऊपर इन समर्स, तो उसमें इवेपोरेट भी हो रहा है. तो इसीलिए वाटर का लॉस जो है वो बहुत ज्यादा हो रहा है बॉडी से इन केस ऑफ द टेरेस्ट्रियल ऑर्गेनिजम्स आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट. So to meet the requirement of body for water, you must have some system so that the body doesn't lose much of water during these metabolic processes. So for that counter current mechanism is very important. ठीक है, so इसमें जनरली क्या होता है कि नॉर्मल 70 kg ह्यूमन मस्ट एक्सक्रीट अबाउट 600 मिली ऑस्मोल्स ऑफ सोल्यूट ईच डे. एक डे की बात हो रही है ये, ठीक है. और अगर आप लोगों को याद हो वैल्यूज फ्रॉम द लेक्चर, दैट इन द लूप ऑफ हेनले व्हेन इट इज टर्निंग, इट इज forming this U shaped and it is forming this thin ascending limb. So at the end, at this turn, the osmotic value of the fluid is 1200 milliosmoles. Okay, if you guys remember this thing. So इतना तक कॉन्सेंट्रेट जो है हमारी बॉडी यूरिन को कर देती है, सो दैट क्या होता है कि मैक्सिमम लॉस ऑफ वाटर ना हो. ठीक है, एंड दिस कॉल्ड ऑब्लिगेटरी यूरिन वॉल्यूम इज अबाउट 500 ml per day for a normal human being. ठीक है, तो this is all because of this counter current mechanism. Fluid intake is required to match this loss, but the ability of kidney to form a small volume of concentrated urine minimizes the intake of fluid required to maintain hemostasis, a function that is especially important when water is in short supply. When you don't drink much of a water, then if you guys have ever observed, the urine is much more concentrated. So it is just to maintain the body requirements. ठीक है, दिस ऑस्ट्रेलियन हॉपिंग माउस, इट एक्चुअली आप लोग अगर वैल्यूज देख रहे हैं, सो इट कैन कॉन्सेंट्रेट इट्स यूरिन अप टू 10,000 मिली ऑस्मोल्स पर लीटर. देख रहे हैं कितनी हाई कॉन्सेंट्रेशन है. और ये these organisms actually use the metabolic water that is being formed in their body also. They don't lose it as such, they actually use that also. ठीक है, और जो एनिमल अडेप्टेड टू एक्वाटिक एनवायरमेंट है सच एज बीवर have minimal urine concentrating ability and they can concentrate the urine only about 500 milliosmoles, इससे ऊपर नहीं जा सकते क्योंकि इनके पास plenty of water available है. ठीक है, this was just an example to make you guys understand. Okay, so the kidneys excrete excess of water by forming a dilute urine in the situation when we have had much more of water which the body doesn't need. ठीक है, blood pressure high हो रहा है तो उस केस में क्या होगा, जो यूरिन है वो बहुत डाइल्यूट होगा. लेकिन if there is a scarcity of water in the body, then the ADH and many more hormones will come into the function and the urine will be concentrated. Yeah, this is what they have shown here. And if you can see this value, in case of dilute urine, the value here is 600 only because we want to excrete much more water. But when the urine is concentrated, and if you see the value here, it is 1200 milliosmoles, which is very high, almost double. ठीक है, तो this situation happens when the scarcity of water is there in the body. ठीक है, renal mechanisms क्या है for excreting a dilute urine. When there is a large excess of water in the body, the kidney can excrete as much as 20 liter per day of dilute urine with a concentration as low as 50 milliosmoles. ठीक है, the kidney performs this impressive feat by continuing to reabsorb solutes while failing to reabsorb large amount of water in the distal parts of the nephron, including the late distal tubule. बिकॉज अब क्या होगा, एडीएच तो वहां है नहीं, एडीएच नहीं है तो एक्वापोरेंस नहीं आएंगे, एक्वापोरेंस नहीं आएंगे तो वाटर का रीअब्जॉर्प्शन नहीं होगा, वाटर का रीअब्जॉर्प्शन नहीं होगा तो दैट मैक्सिमम अमाउंट ऑफ वाटर विल बी excreted out. ठीक है, so this is that you guys should understand, and this is with the time how the osmolality is changing with the time. That initially the osmolality is around 300 or 400, if we say this is 300, this is not 300 actually. This is in the situation when we have taken 1 liter of water. So osmolality is obviously what? This should be less in. ठीक है? Plasma osmolality. Yes, plasma osmolality is less. Urine osmolality will obviously increase because the uh, filtrate will be diluted. Here we want to excrete much more amount of the blood. Oh, sorry, not blood. It's filtrate. So yes, that will happen. ठीक है, सो दिस इज जस्ट शोइंग कि यूरिन का फ्लो रेट कैसे इंक्रीज हो जाता है लो ऑस्मोलैरिटी के साथ बिकॉज वी वांट टू एक्सक्रीट द डाइल्यूट यूरिन. ठीक है, बट एट द एंड जब बिल्कुल वो साइकिल पूरी होती है आफ्टर 3 hours, the urine osmolality will increase because maximum according to the need of the body maximum of the water is reabsorbed and a concentrated urine is passed out. ठीक, this is just to show you the osmotic gradient across the renal medulla and renal cortex. The cortex, if you can see 300, 300, it is almost isotonic to what the osmolality of the blood is. And if we'll go deep into the medulla, it will increase, it will reach up to 1200. And one of the contributing factor for this 1200 osmolality in the medulla is urea. ठीक है, यूरिया इज ऑल्सो वन ऑफ द कंट्रीब्यूटिंग फैक्टर. ठीक है, तो काउंटर करंट मैकेनिज्म क्या होता है, डिपेंड्स अपॉन द स्पेशल एनाटॉमिकल अरेंजमेंट ऑफ loops of Henle and the vasa recta. Vasa recta is what? This is the arrangement of blood capillaries, peritubular capillaries, जिन्हें हम कहते हैं, this is called as the what? These are specialized type of capillaries and these are called as the vasa recta. These capillaries are found in the renal medulla only. ठीक है, in humans about 15% of the nephrons are what? Juxtamedullary nephrons. If you guys remember, we have read about them before in the previous lecture. And here also you can see these actually juxtaglomerular nephrons runs deep in the medulla. ठीक है, cortical nephrons don't go that much deep in the medulla that much as the juxtamedullary nephrons go. With loop of Henle and vasa recta that go deeply into the medulla before returning to the cortex. Some of the loops of Henle dip all the way to the tips of renal papillae. Renal papillae क्या होते हैं? ये renal papillae होते हैं. ठीक है, this is what renal papillae are. This is what renal papillae are. ठीक है, तो तो इनकी टिप तक जो है इतने डीप जा सकते हैं एक्स्ट्रा ग्लैमरुलर्स, ठीक है। सो दैट प्रोजेक्ट फ्रॉम द मेडुला इनटू द रीनल पेल्विस, ठीक। द पैरेललिंग ऑफ द लूप ऑफ हेनले एंड आर the paralleling of the loops of Henle and the vasa recta, which also loop down into the medulla before returning to the renal cortex, and finally the collecting ducts, which carry urine through the hyperosmotic renal medulla before it is excreted, also play a critical role in the countercurrent mechanism. So this countercurrent mechanism is actually because of this arrangement of this vasa recta and the loops of Henle. ठीक है? If you can see, we'll start right from the proximal convoluted tubule. So countercurrent mechanism, what it does, it produces a hyperosmotic renal medullary interstitium. कैसे करता है ये? If you guys remember, in the proximal convoluted tubule and in the thick descending limb, or if you want to say it totally as a proximal convoluted tubule, you can. There were aquaporins present, so maximum amount of water can be reabsorbed here. Nearly 20% of the water present in the filtrate can be reabsorbed here. So that is what happens. एक minute. ठीक है जी. So that is what happens here. The maximum amount of water is reabsorbed here, and the osmolality of the fluid passing through this loop of Henle increases, and it reaches up to 1200. Now, when it is reaching into this thick or thin ascending limb, the water, this limb is actually virtually impermeable to water. So the maximum amount of salts is getting reabsorbed here into the renal interstitium, and also this will dilute the filtrate also. The osmolality, if you can see, it reaches up to 100, ठीक है. और उसके बाद क्या होगा? When it is entering into the what collecting duct, the water is again getting reabsorbed, but along with it some amount of ions and urea is also getting reabsorbed, so that the osmolality of that renal medulla is maintained, and also the blood pressure, that is the blood flowing through the blood capillary, is also maintained, and concentrated urine can be excreted to prevent the much loss of ions and the water, ठीक है. So the osmolality of interstitial fluid in almost all parts of the body is about 300 milliosmoles, which is the similar to the plasma osmolality, and the osmolality of the interstitial fluid in the medulla of the kidney is much higher, ठीक है, increasing progressively to about 1200 to 1400 milliosmoles in the pelvic tip of the medulla. This means that the renal medullary interstitium has accumulated solutes in great excess of water, ठीक है, so that to maintain the osmolality and to prevent much loss of water. Once the high solute concentration in the medulla, it is maintained by a balanced inflow and outflow of solutes and water in the medulla. And urea is one of the most important contributing factors in maintaining this osmolality of the medulla. Okay? So the major factor that contributes to the buildup of solute concentration into the renal medulla are as follows: active transport of sodium ions, active transport of ions from collecting ducts into the medullary interstitium, including urea, and the facilitated diffusion of large amounts of urea, as I told you, and the diffusion of only some small amounts of water from the medullary tubules into the medullary interstitium. ठीक है? This is the small amount of water that is traveling through these aquaporins that representing the collecting duct into the medulla to maintain the osmolality. Otherwise क्या होगा? अगर osmolality maintain नहीं होगी तो जो पूरा हमारा काउंटर करंट मैकेनिज्म है दैट विल बी डिस्टर्ब्ड, ठीक है. ओके, तो जनरेशन ऑफ सिंगल इफेक्ट इन द लूप ऑफ हेनले कैसे होता है ये? The walls of the ascending limbs are essentially impermeable to water, as we have read already, and are drawn thick to symbolize that. ठीक है. अब क्या होगा? एक्टिव ट्रांसपोर्ट ऑफ NaCl आउट ऑफ द फ्लूइड इन द असेंडिंग लिम्ब डाइल्यूट्स द फ्लूइड एंड कॉन्सेंट्रेट्स द इंटरस्टिशियल फ्लूइड, ठीक है. And the walls of the descending limbs are permeable to water, so that fluid inside becomes concentrated by losing water osmotically to the interstitial fluid, and sometimes by gaining sodium and chloride by diffusion. ठीक है, तो अगर आप देखें these both limbs are actually parallel although the motion in them is totally opposite, but these are both parallel. So क्या होगा कि जो ये लिम्ब है, this is descending limb and this is ascending limb. यहाँ से वाटर आ जा रहा है, यहाँ से सॉल्ट्स आ जा रहे हैं, तो यहाँ पे ऑस्मोलैलिटी जो है वो ऑलमोस्ट मेंटेन हो रही है अकॉर्डिंग टू द लिम्स, और जिसकी वजह से क्या होगा कि ये तो इम्परमेबल टू वाटर, तो वाटर वॉन्ट एंटर हियर बट वाटर विल एंटर फ्रॉम हियर टू हियर. ठीक है, एंड द सॉल्ट्स आर एंटरिंग फ्रॉम दिस असेंडिंग लिम्ब टू हियर. सो ऑस्मोलैरिटी इधर भी मेंटेन है, इधर भी मेंटेन है, सो दैट द वाटर वॉन्ट गेट बैक इनटू दिस filtrate where the limb is actually permeable to water. So osmolality यहाँ maintained है, water is coming from here, solutes are coming from here, and the osmolality in the medullary interstitium and the limbs is maintained, and maximum amount of water and solutes is being reabsorbed in the interstitial medullary interstitium. ठीक है, the single effect is the difference in osmotic pressure and NaCl concentration between the ascending limb fluid and the adjacent interstitial fluid and descending limb fluid. So this difference is actually what the single effect, and this is well designed in a way that not much loss of water and sodium is prevented. ठीक है, यहाँ पे जैसे आप देखेंगे कि ठीक है, तो जैसे कि ब्लड इज फ्लोइंग, सॉरी, फिल्ट्रेट इज फ्लोइंग फ्लोइंग फ्लोइंग, तो जैसे कि नीचे की तरफ फ्लो कर रहा है इन द लूप ऑफ हेनले इन द डिसेंडिंग लिम्ब, इट इज गेटिंग कॉन्सेंट्रेटेड कॉन्सेंट्रेटेड बिकॉज वाटर इज बीइंग रीअब्सॉर्ब्ड इनटू द इंटरस्टिशियम. अब वाटर यहाँ पे रीअब्सॉर्ब हो गया, यहाँ पे कॉन्सेंट्रेशन ज्यादा है, यहाँ कॉन्सेंट्रेशन अगर कम होगी तो वाटर विल कम बैक इनटू द फिल्ट्रेट. सो टू प्रिवेंट दैट इन द असेंडिंग लिम्ब क्या होगा, the ions will be reabsorbed, sodium and chloride ions will be reabsorbed to increase the osmolality of the medullary interstitium, so that the isotonicity of this descending limb and medullary interstitium can be maintained and the water loss can be prevented. ठीक है, so this is how this is maintained at every step, and then the urine is further concentrated into the collecting duct. ठीक है, वासा रेक्टा में क्या होता है, द काउंटर करंट एक्सचेंज मैकेनिज्म ऑपरेट्स एज फॉलोज. Blood enters and leaves the medulla by way of vasa recta, as we all know, at the boundary of the cortex and renal medulla. The vasa recta, like other capillaries, are highly permeable to solutes in the blood except for plasma proteins. ठीक है, तो वासा रेक्टा है तो क्या, एंडोथेलियल सेल्स की एक सिंगल लेयर्ड सेल लाइनिंग ही तो है, तो उसमें क्या होगा कि दिस इज वेरी परमिएबल, लेकिन जो प्लाज्मा प्रोटीन है दे कांट क्रॉस दिस लाइनिंग ऑफ दिस कैपिलरीज. ठीक है, so as blood descends into the medulla towards the papillae, it becomes progressively more concentrated, partially by the solute entry from the interstitium and partially by the loss of water into the interstitium. By the time blood reaches the tips of the vasa recta, it has a concentration of about what, 1200 मिलीऑस्मोल्स, क्योंकि जो डीप इन मेडुला जो कॉन्सेंट्रेशन है वहां पे जो ऑस्मोलैलिटी है वो भी इतनी ही है. ठीक है, तो इसकी भी उसी से आइसोटोनिक होगी तभी बात बनेगी, अदरवाइज इट विल कीप ऑन लूजिंग वाटर एंड वाटर एंड वाटर. ठीक है, so the same as that of the medullary interstitium, as blood ascends back towards the cortex, it becomes progressively less concentrated as solutes diffuse back out into the medullary interstitium and as water moves into the vasa recta. ठीक है, तो जो वो है वो मेंटेन रहता है ऑस्मोलैलिटी के अकॉर्डिंग एज इट पासेस थ्रू द डिफरेंट फेजेस. ठीक है, so counter current exchange in the vasa recta preserves hyperosmolarity of the renal medulla. Blood flow must be provided to renal medulla to supply the metabolic needs of the cell in this part of the kidney. Obviously, they also need oxygen and metabolic nutrients. Without a special medullary blood flow system, the solutes pumped into the renal medulla by the countercurrent medulla system would be rapidly dissipated. There are two special features of renal medullary blood flow that contributes to the preservation of high solute concentration. क्या होते हैं वो? The medullary blood flow is low, accounting for less than 5% of the total renal blood flow. This sluggish blood flow is sufficient to supply the metabolic needs of the tissue, but helps to minimize solute loss from the medullary interstitium. क्योंकि अगर सोल्यूट वहां पे इकट्ठा होता रहेगा तो एक पॉइंट ऐसा आएगा कि वहां की ऑस्मोलैरिटी बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ जाएगी, एंड इफ इट इंक्रीजेस beyond a point then obviously the solute will be lost in the urine also, because क्या होगा कि osmolarity ज्यादा हो जाएगी, तो एक पॉइंट के बाद शायद वहां पे रीअब्जॉर्प्शन जो है that will be affected. ठीक है, so the vasodilators serve as a counter current exchanger, minimizing washouts of solute from the medullary interstitium. ठीक है, तो इसीलिए blood flow जरूरी है. And this is all just a graph to show you the cell volume regulation compatible solutes and countering action solutes in the medulla to maintain that what the osmolality. ठीक है, अच्छा ऑस्मोरिसेप्टर्स कैसे वर्क करते हैं? ऑस्मोरिसेप्टर्स आर देयर इन द हाइपोथैलेमस. सो जैसे वाटर डेफिशिएंट सिचुएशन होगी तो उसमें क्या होगा, extracellular osmolarity will increase, which will activate what? Osmoreceptors. Osmoreceptors activate होंगे तो they will increase the secretion of ADH, antidiuretic hormone, from the posterior pituitary, जिसको हम क्या कहते हैं, प्लाज्मा, सॉरी, yes, this ADH will be secreted from this posterior pituitary into the capillaries that are flowing through this pituitary gland. तो प्लाज्मा में ADH की कॉन्सेंट्रेशन इंक्रीज हो जाएगी, जिसको हम ऑल्सो क्या कहते हैं, वैसोप्रेसिन भी कहते हैं. ठीक है, तो H2O permeability in distal tubules collecting ducts will increase. As I told you, ADH will come into action. एक्वापोरिन्स को वो लोकलाइज कर देगा एपिकल मेम्ब्रेन पे और वाटर विल बी रीअब्सॉर्ब्ड. ठीक है, तो H2O रीअब्सॉर्प्शन होगी और H2O का जो एक्सक्रीशन है दैट विल बी डिक्रीज. दैट इज हाउ द ऑस्मोरिसेप्टर्स वर्क. This is also the same mechanism that is working if we'll see in terms of the action potential in neurons, because we all know ADH is a neurohormone. ठीक है, neurons are involved in the formation of this ADH and secretion also. ठीक है, तो क्या होगा, cell autonomous osmoreception in vasopressin neurons. Changes in osmolarity causes inversely proportional changes in the soma volume, somatic this cytosolic volume. ठीक है, shrinkage activates non-selective cation channels and the ensuing depolarization increases action potential, firing rate and vasopressin release from the axon terminals into the neurohypophysis. क्या होगा कि आसपास मान लो कि आपके ऑस्मोलैरिटी का जब चेंज होगा तो जो सोमा वॉल्यूम है, जब जो कंडीशन है दैट इज क्या, हाइपरटोनिक हो जाएगी. हाइपरटोनिक हो जाएगी जब वाटर का वॉल्यूम कम हो जाएगा. वाटर का वॉल्यूम कम है, सोल्यूट्स का कॉन्सेंट्रेशन ज्यादा है, ऑस्मोलैरिटी विल इंक्रीज. ऑस्मोलैरिटी इंक्रीज होगी तो जो न्यूरॉन्स हैं उनका जो सोमा वॉल्यूम है दैट विल डिक्रीज, क्योंकि वाटर विल ट्राई टू मूव फ्रॉम लो कॉन्सेंट्रेशन टू हाई कॉन्सेंट्रेशन टू मेक इट एन आइसोटोनिक सिचुएशन. उस केस में क्या होगा कि एक्शन पोटेंशियल जो है वो इंक्रीज हो जाएगा, नॉन सेलेक्टिव कैटायन चैनल जो है एक्टिवेट हो जाएंगे एंड दैट विल कॉज द एक्शन पोटेंशियल. एक्शन पोटेंशियल होगा तो दैट विल इंक्रीज द व्हाट, वैसोप्रेसिन, सॉरी, वैसोप्रेसिन विल इंक्रीज. वैसोप्रेसिन इंक्रीज का सिक्रीशन जो है, क्योंकि न्यूरो हार्मोन है, so these neural cells will secrete the vasopressin. They will direct the pituitary to secrete the vasopressin into the blood so that maximum of water can be reabsorbed and this isotonic situation can be maintained. ठीक है, तो इसीलिए this is how this vasopressin signal works. ठीक है, this is just to show you कि when the body is dehydrated, active aquaporins in collecting ducts get located there, as I told you, in the under the effect of ADH. And when the body is hydrated, these aquaporins will not be there, so maximum amount of water will be excreted out. Again showing you this work of vasopressin in locating these aquaporins through these vesicles onto the apical membrane. ठीक है, यूरिया ट्रांसपोर्ट, एज आई टोल्ड यू, इट इज मेंटेन्ड इन द मेडुला टू what, to increase the osmolality, to maintain the osmolality so that the osmolality at different levels can be maintained and accordingly the balance of solute and water reabsorption and the blood pressure can be maintained. This is what is urea. Acha, thirst, and another thing is this, sorry, this thirst. Thirst is actually again a physiological mechanism of the body to maintain what? To maintain this, sorry, behavioral. This is a behavioral response of the body, that the body is feeling dehydrated and the amount of water should be should be increased in the body, so that the functioning, the blood pressure and another things can be maintained. So thirst is that, and it acts by the osmoreceptors. It is like if you feel dry in the throat, although the blood sorry, the amount of water is there, the saliva is there, but when the amount of saliva entering your throat lessens, it activates the osmoreceptors, and then again the whole process as we saw before will start, and the ADH will be increased in the blood, and finally the water reabsorption will be increased. Okay, so if you can see in case of the vasopressin, there is this thirst is the signal, and the plasma vasopressin का amount जो है वो बढ़ रहा है धीरे धीरे, and after some point it will become constant. And जब ये detect करते हैं कि the osmolality of blood has come back to its normal, then it will be, half life is around 16 to 24 minutes. So after that this vasopressin will be degraded. ठीक है. Diabetes mellitus and diabetes insipidus is a condition. Diabetes insipidus refers to the high rate of production of dilute urine, either because the posterior pituitary fails to release vasopressin or because the kidney does not respond to hormone. तो उस केस में क्या होगा कि जो amount of urine secretion है that will be high. This should be contrasted with diabetes mellitus, in which increased urine flow is a consequence of osmotic diuresis produced by the filtration and incomplete reabsorption of large amount of glucose. अगर glucose का amount ज़्यादा रहेगा, osmolality increase होगी, तो large amount of water will be what? Excreted out. ठीक है. So the failure to produce or release vasopressin is referred to as central diabetes insipidus. This is a rare congenital disorder, but it may also be caused by the surgical procedures, infections, cerebrovascular accidents, or trauma. ठीक है. Removal of pituitary does not always cause a total lack of vasopressin production, because some of the nerves responsible for releasing the hormone end in the pituitary stalk also. ठीक है. लेकिन हाँ, this is a condition, and desmopressin is the synthetic replacement of vasopressin, which is generally given to these patients. Okay, now the last thing here that we want to discuss today is atrial natriuretic peptide. It is a 28 amino acid peptide, and it is a very powerful vasodilator, a protein hormone secreted by the heart muscle cells. If you guys remember, we heard this name when we were talking about the cardiac system. It is involved in the homeostatic control of the body, water, sodium, potassium, and fat, adipose tissue control of the these things. It is released by the muscle cells in the upper chambers. Upper chambers कौन से थे? Atrias. ठीक है. Of the heart in response to high blood volume. जब blood volume बहुत ज्यादा है, जब उसको लग रहा है कि cardiac output बढ़ रहा है, तो उस situation में this ANP will be released. It will act to reduce the water, sodium, and adipose loads on the circulatory system, thereby reducing what? Blood pressure. So ANP is actually here to decrease the blood pressure, while this ADH or aldosterone were working in the direction of increasing the blood pressure. ठीक है. तो ANP क्या करता है? It actually inhibits this epithelium sodium channels. अगर वो नहीं होंगे तो सोडियम का लेवल, सोडियम वॉन्ट बी रीअब्सॉर्ब मच, तो वाटर वॉन्ट बी रीअब्सॉर्ब मच, और ब्लड प्रेशर जो है वो डिक्रीज कर जाएगा. ठीक है. So this is what was important. Now let's move towards the assignment questions. Till now, if anyone wants to ask me anything, they can ask me. uh, किसी को कोई क्वेश्चन है अभी तक पूछ लीजिए, अदरवाइज विल प्रोसीड टुवर्ड्स द व्हाट, the question segment that we always do in our class. We'll proceed towards that. असाइनमेंट क्वेश्चंस भी हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे. अगर किसी के कोई क्वेश्चंस हैं तो वी कैन टेक दैट क्वेरी आल्सो. हाँ जी, नहीं पूछनी है तो लेट्स स्टार्ट विद द असाइनमेंट क्वेश्चंस. ठीक है, तो फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन इज दिस. Find the correct order, and I would request if you guys will answer this question, I would be very happy, please. So, the one which is marked as 1 is, what is that? Which activates drinking? What activates drinking? Drinking water. What activates that?
Hypothalamus.
No, this is the plasma osmolality. उसमें change आएगा तभी तो body osmoreceptors को activate करेगी कि you induce the thirst, so that the drinking can be, the body intake of water in the body will increase. ठीक है? So yes, this is plasma osmolality. Okay, what is this thing that is marked as second? 2 जिसको हमने mark किया हुआ है.
Hypothalamus.
This is hypothalamus, because hypothalamus will send hypothalamus has this osmoreceptors. ठीक है? And what is this thing which is marked as third?
Pituitary gland.
Pituitary gland. And which is this thing which is marked as fourth?
Kidney.
Kidney. Yes. Okay, next question. Find the correct order. What is one? What is the situation which will
The
lead to
slide
this?
is not.
Sorry?
The slide is not changed yet.
Slide hasn't changed. Now is it has changed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, tell me. What is one? What is this condition which is inducing this whole process? It is a deficiency of water in the body,
Water deficient.
है ना? So then this deficiency will lead to what? This ADH secretion from posterior pituitary will lead to what? Increase in what? Increase in ADH amount in plasma, right? And after that, the whole process will go on. So what is this thing that is marked as third? Extracellular osmolality will increase. That is why this ADH secretion will be activated, right? It will be induced. And this thing that is marked as fourth is decrease in water excretion. This is the whole cycle that we have discussed like 5 to 10 minutes back. Okay, so this is, you guys should remember, this is how the things work. Okay, this is the actual action potential inside this neurons, depending upon the shrinkage or the good amount of soma volume inside these neurons. So you guys must remember these values. These are all values. ठीक है? So I don't think you guys faced any problem in this. Let's move towards this next. This is the graph we have just discussed. So what is this thing which is marked as 1? किस चीज के levels हैं ये?
Slide doesn't change.
Slide hasn't changed. क्या problem हो रही है? अब change हुई है?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what is this thing which is marked as 1? Answer is in front of you. This is plasma vasopressin
Plasma.
levels. Yes, plasma vasopressin levels. Which is this thing which is marked as 2? You guys must have understood it by the unit they have given.
Plasma osmolality.
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 Yes. And what is this thing which is which actually acts as an signal, an inducer for this
First.
vasopressin? Yes, thrust. Okay. So this was now we'll move towards our cautions that I have brought for you guys. I hope slide has changed. So I would request everyone to write these answers into your chat box so that everyone can participate. Okay. First question is, which of the following is not an excretory organ in humans? बताइए. Question number 1 का answer, which of the following is not an excretory organ in the humans?
Heart, ma'am.
क्वेश्चन नंबर 1 का आंसर प्लीज चैट बॉक्स में लिख दीजिए. Everyone, I would love if everyone would participate. Which of the following is not an excretory organ in humans? बाकी लोग? Maybe yes. Perfect. So answer is C, heart. ठीक है. Next question is which hormone regulates water reabsorption in the kidneys? हम लोग अभी पढ़ के आए हैं इसको. Which hormone regulates water reabsorption in the kidneys? Okay, Rajata says B. बाकी लोग क्या कह रहे हैं भी? Yes, it is B. That is vasopressin. ठीक है. Which part of kidney contains the glomeruli? कौन से पार्ट में होता है? Options are renal cortex, renal medulla, renal pelvis और ureter. Glomeruli renal pelvis में होते हैं according to you, नव्या. बाकी सब लोगों का क्या कहना भी इस पे? Renal cortex. ठीक है. So answer is renal
No, ma'am,
cortex.
sorry.
हाँ, it's
In
okay.
renal pelvis,
Renal cortex. Renal pelvis was that reason as I told you, जहाँ पे हमारे
yes.
जितने भी renal pyramids हैं वो खुलते हैं. ठीक है. So it is that region. ठीक. Okay. Next question. Question number 4. The main function of kidneys is to what? The main function of kidneys is? I am asking about question number 4's answer. बताइए. The main function of the kidney is to maintain osmotic balance. Very right. Okay, next question is which of the following is the correct sequence of what? Urine formation. बताइए. सबसे पहले क्या होगा? Yes, it is filtration, reabsorption and secretion. Answer B is correct. Next question is the counter current multiplier system in the nephron is primarily responsible for. Counter current mechanism किस लिए होता है? Correct. Concentrating urine. It is for concentration of urine. ठीक है. Okay, next question. The loop of Henle is most developed in what? In which type of animals? किसको loop of Henle सबसे ज्यादा develop करने की जरूरत है? आपको पता है loop of Henle में क्या होता है? Maximum reabsorption of water and sodium ions. So किस तरह के animals को सबसे ज्यादा जरूरत है इसकी? Desert mammals. Yes, you're right. It is desert mammals. Okay, next question is what does maximum water reabsorb? Where does maximum reabsorption of water occurs in the nephron? Where does maximum water reabsorption occurs in nephron? Question 8 का आंसर आप लोग बताइए मुझे क्या होगा? पढ़ क्या आए हम लोग अभी? It is proximal convoluted tubule. Yes, it is proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, so the next question is which part of the nephron acts as the counter current multiplier? Counter current multiplier किस part को कहेंगे हम लोग? Yes, it is C. It is loop of Henle. लूप ऑफ हेनले को हम लोग क्या कहेंगे? काउंटर करंट मल्टीप्लाई. ठीक है. इसके बाद 3 questions are left that I am leaving for you guys. Try to solve them. If you guys face any problem, you can always take them in the next class. Apart from that, if anyone wants to ask me anything, if anyone is left with some confusion, they can ask me.
Ma'am, please tell us some important points, ma'am, through this session. What are the important points, ma'am?
Important points.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
For important points,
Main
I think.
important.
Sorry.
Main important points.
Main important points, Navya, is that you have to study this whole mechanism. We can't keep some points in mind because this is a total process. This is not something ki ठीक है कुछ पार्ट याद कर लिया कुछ पार्ट नहीं. दिस इज अ होल प्रोसेस. अगर आपने एक भी चीज छोड़ दी, यू वांट बी एबल टू रिमेंबर. अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट, जो चीज आप याद रख सकते हैं कि एक तो जो हमारा असेंडिंग लिम्ब होता है, दैट इज द डाइल्यूटिंग लिम्ब. ठीक है, दिस इज द डाइल्यूटिंग ट्यूब्यूल. वहां पे डाइल्यूशन होता है क्योंकि वहां पे जो है आयंस का रीअब्जॉर्प्शन होता है, वाटर का नहीं होता है. जो डिसेंडिंग लिम्ब होता है, दैट इज द कॉन्सेंट्रेटिंग लिम्ब. वहां पे कॉन्सेंट्रेशन होता है क्योंकि वहां पे वाटर का रीअब्जॉर्प्शन होता है, बट आयंस का बहुत मॉडरेट रीअब्जॉर्प्शन होता है. ठीक है, तो ये चीज एक आप लोग याद रख सकते हैं. दैट विल हेल्प यू इन अंडरस्टैंडिंग दिस. बाकी आप एडीएच हार्मोन का याद रख सकते हैं कि दैट इज रिलीज्ड फ्रॉम पोस्टीरियर पिट्यूटरी टू द कैपिलरीज एंड इट एक्ट्स अपॉन द cells in this nephron in the collecting duct cells. और उसकी वजह से क्या होगा, अर्ली जो कॉर्टिकल कनेक्टिंग डक्ट सेल्स थी उसमें, उसकी वजह से क्या होगा, दैट विल हेल्प इन इंक्रीज ऑफ द ब्लड प्रेशर. while this atrial natriuretic peptide will which is a vasodilator, it helps in decrease of the blood pressure. ठीक है, तो ये चीजें आप कुछ याद रख सकते हैं. अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट, दिस काउंटर करंट मैकेनिज्म, this is something you have to remember wholly, because this is a whole process. You can't be like कि मैंने एक पार्ट पढ़ लिया एक पार्ट नहीं पढ़ा है. this won't work that way. ठीक है, और उसके अलावा आप लोग क्या याद रख सकते हैं इसमें. Different parts have different kind of recept this pumps and exchange channels working. So आपको वो भी याद रखने होंगे कि कहाँ पे हमारा जो है सोडियम रीअब्सॉर्ब हो रहा है, कहाँ पे वाटर रीअब्सॉर्ब हो रहा है, एक्वापोरिन्स कहाँ आ रहे हैं, कहाँ पे, जैसे कि प्रॉक्सिमल कॉन्जुलेटेड ट्यूब्यूल में और जो है हमारे पास कॉन्स्टिट्यूटिव एक्वापोरिन्स है, दैट दे आर ऑलवेज प्रेजेंट देयर. while in case of this कलेक्टिंग डक्ट, इट इज एक्चुअली कंडीशनल कि जब अगर वहां पे एडीएच आएगा तो these aquaporins will be localized onto the membrane and will reabsorb water. If there is no ADH, then these aquaporins won't be there on the apical side. ठीक है, basolateral side में they are constitutive, but on the apical side they will come into action only when there is ADH present. ठीक है, तो these are some of the important things that you should keep in mind. Apart from that, you have to read the whole process. Okay, anything else you want to ask?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
You're
No,
welcome.
ma'am.
Okay, if no one wants to ask anything else, then we can conclude the session. You guys can leave the meeting. If no one has any or more questions, you guys can leave the meeting.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're
Good night, ma'am.
welcome. You're welcome,
Thank you,
everyone.
madam.
You're welcome.